All right, so welcome back to another episode of This with Krish. I'm your host, Krish Dokia, and I guess you cannot escape all of the news happening across the country about the winter storms, and guess what? I am not talking about the winter storms today. I've got a special episode, a little bit long, but it's kind of been weighing on me. I've been thinking about it. I've been reading a lot of articles and watching a lot of news conferences and press conferences. And so today, I'm going to slow things down. I'm going to zoom things out and try to make sense of some of the world that we live in, and maybe have an honest conversation at the same time. So today, I am excited to share that I am talking about college football, which I absolutely love. And if you hear a lot of planes or background noise, it's because there's a lot of planes going over our house. Apparently, maybe something to do with everyone trying to get in or out of town based on the upcoming winter storms, which are, I guess, 48 hours away. But anyway, back to college football. Look, I'm talking about the joy of football, the chaos, the confusion, the passion, and at least one or two moments where you've kind of stared at your television wondering how this sport, college football, somehow feels brand new and completely unrecognizable at the same exact time. So if you're a college football fan like I am, go Dogs. We didn't make it to the or to the national championship this year, unfortunately. But what we've just lived through was not a normal season, you guys, okay? It was not calm, it was not predictable, and it certainly did not follow the same rules or rhythms that many of us have grown up with watching college football. What we just experienced was, I would say, a full-scale stress test for the sport itself. Now, the season did not end quietly, right? With a trophy presentation and a polite thank you to the sponsors. No, it ended with nonstop debate, right? Constant transfer portal movement, college football coaches, getting fired and hired, NIL speculations, eligibility confusion, and the growing realization that some of the players on the field are old enough to have been on the field years ago, while others were attending prom not that long ago. Okay, and at the same time, the incoming freshmen were quietly realizing that early playing time is no longer something you can simply earn. Okay, at least not by with your talents. Many of them are now facing decisions that used to belong exclusively to professional athletes, including whether to redshirt, whether to wait, or whether to leave before they truly even get a chance to arrive. Right? Despite all of that, the season was incredible. We saw a lot of competition, a lot of teams that otherwise wouldn't have made it, or typically would not have made it. So Kalshi and the sports betting, I'm sure, was off the hinges this season. I don't gamble, but look, the on-field product was outstanding. The football was fast, it was physical, it was creative. The offensive schemes were sharper, defenses were more sophisticated. Even the quarterbacks, right? Their play across the country has reached a new level of consistency that typically college football doesn't get to enjoy. Most importantly, the real parity finally showed up. The old school days of knowing the playoff picture by early October, those are gone. I mean, there was a lot of surprises this season. Teams remained alive deep into November. Meaningful games mattered late into the season, and fans, they just all were engaged, right? Because the uncertainty existed almost everywhere across the nation. Rivalry games still carried that emotional weight. Stadiums still shook with thousands and thousands of people. Saturdays still felt important. College football is changing. I love it. It's evolving, but it's not, and it's not boring. Okay. The problem, however, there's a problem, is that the same forces making the sport of college football that much more exciting are also kind of like just choking it and pulling it apart in ways that cannot, and I mean cannot be ignored. If we refuse to talk honestly about those forces, then we are not preserving the game. We're simply postponing all of the consequences that are coming along with those changes, okay? And that choking of the sport. So let me talk about it honestly. And I didn't play college football, you guys. I didn't even go to a college that had really good football team, or really even a football team, until last decade or so. The transfer portal is the most obvious place to start. At this point, calling it portal fees is almost polite, because what it has become is unrestricted free agency without the structure that normally accompanies it. Okay, that's the polite way to say it. There are no contracts, there are no salary caps, and there is no governing body with enough authority to meaningfully slow the portal down. What exists instead is leverage. Now, this season, the entire rosters were turned over in a matter of months. The starting quarterbacks transferred at a rate that would have seemed impossible a decade ago. Players didn't leave because they failed. In many cases, they just left because they succeeded. Right? When a player's value increased, options appeared almost instantly. And from that player's perspective, that logic makes sense. If your market value is going up, it is natural. It is totally natural to explore what that value is going to mean elsewhere. All right? We even saw college coaches doing the same darn thing. Excuse my French. God, I got a little passionate, but we're talking about Lane Kiffin. Anyway, from the sports perspective, however, something fundamental has changed. Teams are no longer being patiently built over multiple years. We saw it with Indiana. How did Indiana build the program in 2 years? They're being assembled very quickly, strategically, and sometimes desperately. Okay, continuity has become quite fragile, and stability has become optional. That reality becomes even more complicated when you consider the age. And I'm getting to the age in a minute, but I remember, my wife and I, when Justin Fields was playing high school football in Kennesaw, Georgia, I remember my wife and I going to the high school to watch him, and I remember Kirby Smart coming up in his helicopter, and it was a recruiting day. The head coaches would go to those players and recruit them, and that's how they built programs over years. Okay, when Kirby Smart took over the Georgia Bulldogs at University of Georgia, he built the program. The foundation was there because Mark Richt had built one, and then he continued to recruit. It's something that the spawns of Nick Saban, all of these head coaches had learned from Nick Saban, okay, on how to recruit. And those programs, even Nick Saban at Alabama, it did not happen overnight, you guys, okay? Let me get back into the age thing, because let's break it down. Why are these players so old? Okay? Well, COVID, right? If you guys didn't know this, I'm just going to break it down really quickly for you guys. COVID eligibility did not simply add a single year of participation. In many cases, particular players began their careers at JUCOs, or junior colleges, right? We call it JUCO for the sake of vernacular in college football. And what happened was it added 2 years of eligibility. That result was that college football players are now 24 years old, 25, and sometimes even 26, 27 years old. At the same time, those players are lining up against true freshmen who were in high school less than a year ago. This is not a philosophical debate. It's a physical reality. Bodies are different, strength is different, and emotional maturity, it's also different. College football, in many ways, has become this semi-professional football, okay, that happens to take place just on college campuses. It's not the same as it used to be. We can debate all day. I'll go toe-to-toe with you all day in the comments if you want to state that it is the same. It's not. Prove it. Coaches understand this reality, okay? Which is why the freshmen, particularly quarterbacks, are sitting on the bench more than they ever have. It's not because those players lack talent, right? It is because the players ahead of them are older. They're stronger, they're more experienced, and better equipped to handle the pressure and the chaos on the field. In that sense, now, okay, college football now mirrors the NFL, which we didn't even think was possible years ago, except now they have, well, the only difference is they don't have contracts or structure or safeguards that the NFL will provide these players. Once money enters the environment, everything changes. And again, if you want to go toe-to-toe with me in the comments, I welcome it. Let's go. Okay? The NIL did not merely alter the recruiting like I was saying earlier, right, and the mechanisms there. It's fundamentally changed incentives for certain players, especially the quarterbacks in high-profile positions, right? Staying in college now makes more financial sense than leaving early for the draft, right? There were juniors like that were eligible to go into the draft and they were going. Now that statement alone would have sounded insane a few seasons ago. Why rush to the NFL if you're projected late? Why gamble on a rookie contract when NIL opportunities provide immediate income for college football players or college players and athletes in general, right? Visibility, they're talking about their visibility and brand control. College football now offers money, exposure, and leverage all at once. That reality explains why some players are no longer chasing those NFL Sundays or Mondays, sometimes Thursdays, with that same sense of urgency. Instead, they're just attempting to maximize their Saturdays, right? And this brings us to one of the most influential voices in the history of the sport, Nick Saban. And as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm supposed to apparently hate Nick Saban. I'm not a big fan of Alabama, right? I'll cheer them on if they're the only team to cheer in the SEC and then come national championships. But Nick Saban is incredible, right? And Saban has been very clear about his position. He is not opposed to players earning money. He is not. His concern lies in the structure surrounding how that money is distributed, and then how it's regulated. According to him, okay, there is no meaningful enforcement today. And he's not wrong. And that lack of oversight is not sustainable for the long-term health of college football. It's not. I will say this year was harder to watch than any other year, even though it was exciting, right? Perhaps Nick Saban's most telling observation was when he said that college football is no longer developing the players, but instead they're renting them. Also not wrong. That statement, while it sounds quite bitter or emotional, it's very observational. It was, and it's difficult to refute, right? Because nowhere is this cultural shift more visible than in post-game interviews, okay? And my wife loves watching the post-game interviews. She watches them religiously. Because these changes do not only show up in the contracts, in the eligibility charts, the depth charts, right? There's a lot of charts. They show up in the language, the tone, and the accountability when players speak publicly. Let's consider two moments from this season that perfectly illustrate the differences. And I talked to my wife in length about this specific, these two specific interviews. And, it was this week. It was Monday night, national championship night, okay? And I think maybe one of the interviews was the next day. But look, let's talk about Carson Beck from Miami. Former trader to Georgia Bulldogs, by the way. He played under immense pressure throughout the year. He competes at the highest levels, right? Carries enormous expectations. We don't disregard that. And is constantly discussed in the terms of his professional future. He would have he would have been justified in centering attention on himself, totally. Instead, okay, after major wins, his comments have consistently reflected humility and perspective. He thanked God first. He emphasized the role of his teammates and framed success as a collective effort rather than an individual achievement. I'd like to say that was true. It wasn't. Okay? Because that type of language matters in a sport increasingly driven by personal branding and leverage, right? That mindset reflects leadership. And Carson Beck didn't do that. That's what I'm trying to say, okay? As a player, you have to credit upward. Accountability has to stay inward. And responsibility has to extend outward to the team, okay? And let's talk about, what Fernando Mendoza from Indiana did, okay? Because that's what he did. He thanked God. Carson Beck actually, after that difficult loss on Monday, you know what Carson Beck actually did? He explained that he had done what he was supposed to do and the execution failed elsewhere. That was what he really said. He added that he could only control his own job. And for all the Miami fans out there that are mad that I am currently dogging on Carson Beck for what he didn't say and what he did actually do, okay? I'm sorry, but it's the truth. It's on TV. He did it on national television, right? His response wasn't quite malicious or unethical, but it is becoming increasingly common with these players. However, his tone was transactional and compartmentalized, reflecting sort of a mindset focused on his own individual responsibility rather than the collective leadership. Quarterbacks are leaders on the teams, okay? Now, the former, thanking God, being kind and humble, which Mendoza totally did, and Beck being, kind of like a pompous person. I'm not going to say any bad words, right? I don't think either one of them really violate any rules, right? None of them are inherently wrong, okay? However, culturally, they land very differently with the fans, okay? One sounds like a captain who carries the weight of the group, and the other sounds like a contractor who's just there to fulfill a role. And that contrast captures the crossroads that college football now faces. When players operate as individual brands within loosely sort of connected teams, no one knows anyone. Typically most college football teams, they came up together, they played for several years together. Now it's like, okay, 1 year I played here, 1 year I played there, okay? When players operate that way, leadership at that point becomes optional. Accountability completely narrows and blame becomes easier to distribute. And one of the things Carson Beck said is like, hey, I went on the field, I did what I needed to do. I can't help that, my offensive line or my defense didn't stand up to, do their part. Now, I'm not saying this is a judgment of character. It is the natural outcome of the system that has been created around them. When you layer together the transfer portal, the chaos, the age restrictions, the unregulated NIL, inconsistent officiating, conference realignments, that has technically stripped away regional identity, the picture becomes clear. This season did not break college football. What it did this season, 24-26 season, it exposed the issues. And yet, despite everything that transpired this year, the sport still works, right? The stadiums remain full, the rivalries still matter, Saturdays still feel meaningful, us fans continue to care so deeply, even when we're frustrated or confused. Okay? But that tells us something super important as well, right? College football does not need to move, right, in this backward trajectory, but it desperately, because we're proud of the trajectory it's made, but it also desperately needs structure. It needs clear rules. It can't be changing the rules on the playoffs every, whenever, all willy-nilly. I'm glad that the national championship was introduced, however many years that was, but it also needs consistent enforcement and guardrails that preserve competition while protecting players and teams alike. Right? Like, why does Notre Dame just get to do whatever they want? Let's talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that, but you know what I'm saying, right? 1 minute SEC, 1 minute without, and then complain, and then get grandfathered in as if they are 11-1, whatever it was, to get in the playoff next year. Like, why is that even a thing? It's complete garbage. Chaos is entertaining for all of us for a certain amount of time, but chaos without direction eventually becomes unsustainable. And one of the reasons why Saban retired is he warned us when he retired, if the sport does not fix itself, someone will intervene, and the result's not going to resemble the game fans and our interests, right? It's not going to be as fun. ... This is where college football stands today, okay? At least that's how I believe it is, or where it stands. It's faster, it's richer, it's more talented than it has ever been. And it's also facing a sort of identity crisis that will define the next 10 years or next decade of college football. The coming years is going to determine whether this era becomes the golden age of the sport, or the moment we look back on it and recognize when things started to wobble, okay? Either way, I will be watching, and I will be talking about it. And I think you guys will all be here with me, I hope. I'm not a sports commentator at all, I know. But no matter how strange things become, there's still nothing like college football on a Saturday, right? We do it as a family every Saturday. In fact, like earlier on when I started this podcast last year, I did a whole episode about, I don't like to do things like birthday parties and, weddings and things like that on college football Saturday, especially if the Georgia Bulldogs are playing. But anyway, look, I'm free for the next couple of months. I should be cranking out some podcast episodes. I think in a couple of weeks after the Super Bowl. There's no football until the fall, and that hurts my heart. Look, if you enjoyed this episode, you guys, make sure you're following, okay, on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple, on iHeart, whatever, wherever you listen. Now, if you're watching on YouTube specifically, please, please, please hit subscribe, hit that like button, leave me a comment. Let's duke it out in the comments, okay? Especially if you agree with me, because honest disagreement is part of what makes this so much fun for me. I will see you next time. And as always, I like to add it with, I love y'all, and I'm just going to throw go Dogs and congratulations to Mendoza and Indiana for undefeated 15-0 or 16-0 season. I think it was 16-0. And it was a really good game. I'm glad that it wasn't just a complete blowout for the national championship. So kudos to Miami for putting up that fight. They made a couple of mistakes. I didn't mean all that mean stuff about Carson, Beck that I said, but it's let's go Dogs. I think it's going to be Georgia's fourth natty next year, at least I hope so. Anyway, I love you guys. Thanks for listening.